Jesus died for our sins. You've heard that phrase a million times, right? It's at the absolute core of Christianity. But have you ever really stopped to think about what it's supposed to mean? Like, how does one person's death 2,000 years ago cancel out someone else's mistakes today? To get to the bottom of it, we have to unpack the powerful theology of the man who first explained it all.
Yeah, let's dig into the mechanics here. How exactly does that work? It's not some simple equation, and to really get the logic behind it, we've got to go back to the source. And that source, the earliest and most detailed breakdown we have, comes from a really fascinating figure, a guy who never even met Jesus in the flesh. But his writings? Man, they arguably shaped Christianity more than anyone else's. We're talking, of course, about the Apostle Paul. So what was Paul's big idea? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It's more like a framework with four key parts. He lays out Jesus' death as this multi-layered act of salvation that has four distinct but totally interconnected layers of meaning. Okay, here they are. These are the four pillars of his whole argument: atonement, redemption, justification, and participation. Think of each one like a key, unlocking a different piece of the puzzle. So let's break them down one by one. First step, atonement. The simplest way to think about this one is reconciliation. See, in Paul's mind, sin had created this massive gap, this huge chasm between humanity and a holy God. Jesus' death, then, is the ultimate sacrifice, the one powerful act that finally builds a bridge across that gap and fixes the broken relationship. Okay, next on the list is redemption, and this is where it gets really interesting. You gotta ask, what are we being redeemed from? Paul's answer is the curse of the law. His argument was that the Jewish law, the Torah, set a standard that, let's be honest, no human could ever live up to perfectly. So everyone was kind of stuck under this curse of falling short. Redemption for Paul means being rescued from that impossible burden. All right, so if trying to follow the law perfectly is a dead end, then what's the alternative? And that brings us to number 3, justification. Now, this is basically a legal term. Picture a courtroom. Justification means you're declared righteous or not guilty by the judge, who in this case is God. But here's the absolute game changer. You don't earn this verdict. It's not about your actions. For Paul, it's a total gift, and you receive it just by having faith. And that leads us to the last piece, participation. This is where it gets really personal, the part that's all about transformation. Paul basically says that believers get to metaphorically die with Christ, die to their old sinful life, and then get resurrected with him into a brand new way of living. So it's not just some event that happened way back when, it becomes part of your actual identity. Okay, so you might be thinking, where did Paul cook all this up? Did he just invent it out of thin air? Well, not exactly. It's easy to think that, but to really get his logic, you have to dive into the world he lived in, which was the world of Second Temple Judaism. And this is so important to grasp. Paul was a Jewish thinker through and through. He was working with concepts that were already there. He took this incredible tapestry of his own tradition, ideas about sacrifice and covenants and righteousness, and he rewove the whole thing around the figure of Jesus. So he wasn't just throwing out his heritage. No, he was reinterpreting it in a way that was totally revolutionary. This chart here lays it out so clearly. Just look at the shift he's making. You've got the long-standing system of animal sacrifices in the temple. Paul says that's now fulfilled and replaced by Christ's single, final sacrifice. What about the Mosaic covenant, that core agreement between God and Israel based on the law? He argues that's been superseded by a new covenant. And the idea of being righteous by following the law? Nope. That's replaced by being justified through faith. It's a huge pivot. And his theological toolbox was packed with even more stuff. He was absolutely drawing on the idea of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, right, where the high priest makes a sacrifice for the sins of the whole nation. He was probably looking at Jesus through the lens of the suffering servant from the book of Isaiah, this figure who suffers on behalf of others. And he was tapping into this powerful, widespread hope for redemption, this belief that God was about to kick off a new age to come. Okay, so that's the framework, but let's hear it from the man himself. How did Paul actually phrase all this? We can see his mind ticking if we look right at his own letters. Check this out. This is from his letter to the Galatians, and it is a bold, almost shocking thing to say. He writes, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us." I mean, whoa, what in the world could that possibly mean? Okay, here's the key to unlocking that.
In Jewish law, specifically in the book of Deuteronomy, it says that anyone executed by being hung on a tree is considered cursed by God. So Paul takes this ultimate symbol of shame and disgrace, and he completely flips it on its head. He argues that Jesus dying a cursed death was the very thing, the mechanism that broke the curse of the law for everybody else. It's just a brilliant, stunning bit of theological jujitsu.
Let's look at another one, this time from his huge letter to the Romans. He's way more direct here, and he's using the language of the temple. He says, God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement. See, he's making a direct link between Jesus' death and the whole ritual system that his audience would have known inside and out.
And this just shows you how smart he was, grounding his radical new theology in concepts people already understood. When he calls Jesus a sacrifice of atonement, the Greek word is hilasterion, he is 100% evoking the powerful imagery of Yom Kippur. He's basically saying, Jesus' death was the ultimate day of atonement, not just for one nation, for 1 year, but for all people, for all time. All right, let's zoom out and pull all these threads together. Let's get to the big picture. Why was this package of ideas so potent, so powerful? I mean, why did it end up literally changing the world? Well, it's because what Paul did was pretty extraordinary. He took all these ancient ideas, sacrifice, covenant, God's justice, and wove them into one single powerful story. He offered this completely new way to be seen as right with God, a way that wasn't based on your family tree or how perfectly you followed the rules, but simply on faith. And that threw the doors wide open. In his view, God's plan for salvation could now extend way beyond Israel to include all of humanity. He was basically announcing that history itself had hit a turning point. So, you see, when Paul wrote that famous phrase, Jesus died for our sins, he wasn't just talking about a sad, tragic execution. No, he was proclaiming a cosmic-level event, an act that, in his theology, somehow managed to show both God's perfect justice against sin and God's incredible love for sinners, all at the same time. An act that reordered the universe and opened up a new way back to God for anyone, anywhere, who would just believe. I mean, it's a dense, powerful, and complicated set of ideas, for sure. And look, whether you're a person of faith or not, you just can't deny it. Paul's explanation of this one event laid a foundation that has profoundly shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. Which, of course, leaves us with one last question to chew on. How do the echoes of this one man's ancient theology still reverberate in our world today?